Welcome back. Adeyemo has been on the program before when the attacks happened on the Charlie Hebdo office in Paris. The attackers were extremists who took offense at the magazine's depiction of the Prophet Muhammad. Since then, France has had a few more attacks related to violent extremism. The latest happened on a number of targets in Paris. It's drawn international support for France in the fight against the Islamic State and created a resolve in France to bring down the terror group. Oluwaseyi is certain the world would never perceive Muslims as before the attacks, and Muslim leaders need to do more to educate members on their relations with the rest of the world. Mr. Adeyemo, thank you for joining us on the program. You've been here before and we've talked about, that was when the attacks happened in Paris and the Charlie Hebdo attacks. A number of people died, and then there was this fear that the presence of Muslim extremists in countries where perpetrating lots of violence in the countries and so on. But just before we get to that, let me talk about the latest comments by the U.S. Republican presidential hopeful Donald Trump, who has said that America needs to close its doors to Muslims. What do you make of what he's said in the light of all the other statements that he has made? It's not the first time he's spoken, controversially like this. But what do you make of his latest comment?
It is easy to say that as a person, he's done what I'll call the devil's advocate's work, where he's been the one speaking sort of sincerely to some of the issues that a lot of people will naturally be careful about. I guess my personal opinion now, because he's a very successful businessman, and he feels if I do this, I have a fallback. I can go back to what I was doing. And so in my mind, he's been a little more forthcoming in his comment. Now, the question is whether what he has said are completely right or wrong. That's another issue entirely. But I will say that he has been very, very outspoken. And I guess the reason why he's been able to do that is because he's not thoroughly a politician who will always be very careful, very conscious of followership, and they are most often playing to the gallery and to be sure that they don't lose their following. So I guess Donald in some way would for me be a good thermometer to measure a couple of things that ordinarily we would not have had access to dealing with the regular politicians.
Well, it does seem like, his polls went up, following his recent comments. But would this ever affect, America's relations with other countries? For example, because America is home to a lot of people, a lot of cultures, a lot of religions. There's a respect, for people who are Muslims, who are Christians and all of that. But if America ever does considering closing its doors to Muslims, it would be hurting itself, right?
Obviously, I'm not an American, but I can say categorically that America will obviously not close its doors to Muslims because there's a lot to lose doing that. America understands clearly that, first of all, they want to do business with the world. They're doing well doing business with the world. They have stakes across the world. They have Muslims who are holding very strategic positions in America, in the army, in entertainment, in sports, in the news. An example is Farid, who is a very, very strong. You have Shaquille O'Neal in basketball. You have our own Olajuwon in basketball. You have great Americans who are Muslims. Now, so the idea of just getting a knife to slice between Muslims and Christians is not something that is going to happen in this our world, because obviously we're living in a Christian, Muslim, and other religious or religion world. So it's not something that will happen.
Yeah, but should Muslims really be blamed for what's going on in the U.S.? Most of the attacks have been perpetrated, most of the shootings now, because that's what's going on. Most of the shootings have been perpetrated by Americans themselves. So can Muslims really be blamed for the attacks on American citizens?
The truth of the matter is, when you have a constant attack in any strata or in any level, you're obviously going to be looking for the most obvious reasons and the most closest person to blame. Unfortunately, and I know I've said this here a couple of times that I've been here, the world is making a very, very, very strong mistake that we need to address. We are allowing people to use religion as a cover to unleash terror. That we must correct.
Like what's going on in Paris.
Absolutely. And those are things we need to really, really address. And I mean the world, Muslim clerics, Christians. We need to come together and agree that there's no way any religion will support a human being to go out of his way to kill another human being because of religious reasons. There's no way that can be true. So what I know is happening is that some unscrupulous people all over the world are unleashing terror, and they find a safe haven in religion, and they decide to run there. Because I tell you, the most potent cover is religion. If I do something wrong and I want sympathy, I would tell you the reason why I've done it is because I'm a Christian. And you will naturally sometimes, find people who will stand for me and say, no, you can't touch a Christian, or you can touch a Muslim and all of that. So I think what we need to do clearly as a people, world people now, is to separate religion from terrorism.
I'm thinking that, Donald Trump's statement may have had something to do with the recent attacks in Paris, which has created a resolve in French President François Hollande being more decisive concerning fighting ISIS, and the French are now taking it more personal. The fight against ISIS are now taking it more personal. But I would think that, France has had more attacks, religious attacks, than the United States. Do you think that France itself should begin also to consider tightening its borders to the people that come in? And let's not forget that the migrant crisis is all over Europe. France has really not accepted migrants into its
one of the things we cannot run away from, and I will keep emphasizing it, is the fact that we're at a junction in world history where we cannot completely run away from other people. You cannot do a completely Christian business. You cannot run a completely Christian game. You cannot do anything that is exclusively just for Christians or Muslims, as the case may be. So any government, any responsible government will always find a way to cater for everyone. When you're trying to prepare anything, soup, you must ensure that, as much as I don't like it, you cater for whether the person is gay, whether the person is regular, and all of that. The world is a very diverse place where a lot of people have rights to whatever they're doing, religious belief, and all of that. So, yeah.
Do you think Islamophobia is a real thing? It's a real problem?
The truth is,
because it is spreading across the world.
Terror has been unleashed on the people or on people over the years. And like I said earlier, people will naturally want to find a reason or build a strategy to sort of quenching that. The question is, are we going to be doing a good job or doing justice to dealing with terror if we start to place tags on this exercise or this unhuman behavior of some human beings by tagging it a religious act? That's the question we need to ask ourselves.
If we bring this back home here in Nigeria, there's the fight against Boko Haram going on in northeastern Nigeria, where a group of religious Islamist extremists are carrying out attacks on innocent Nigerians, trying to take up cities and so on. So you would think that if there was a country that did have Islamophobia, it would be Nigeria, but we don't.
No, the truth is, and that's a very, very good example that you've cited, because incidentally, the terror is being unleashed in a predominantly Muslim area. And I know a lot of Muslims that have been killed, not just at any point when they were saying their prayers. Islamic Nigerians were killed by Boko Harams when they were saying the prayers. So obviously, this, for me, underscore my stand that this is definitely not a religious agenda. They're unscrupulous human beings, inhuman people who have their agenda to unleash terror on other people, and what they have done is to do this. And each time they do it, we have allowed them to use religion as a cover, and that is what we need to address. Remove that cover.
And that sounds like a message to the governments, but I'm really wondering here what governments can do, because when you talk about religion, you really need to be careful. These are personal beliefs by people. So if a government is supposed to separate religion, or separate state from religion, and then you are having terrorist attacks that are related to religion, how do you separate? And how do you approach?
The government obviously needs to play a very, very critical role in this, because like I said, it's a global issue. And one of the things they need to quickly do is to definitely ensure that we have an association or a committee where you have people from all the religions gathered together and they speak with one voice. That's important, because there's a need for us to have two sides: the side of the human beings and the side of the inhuman beings, those who unleash terror on other human beings. Now, the best way to go about this is to ensure that everyone is saying, this is wrong, we condemn this, it shouldn't happen, so that it doesn't look like, oh, it's only the Christians that are complaining and are making remarks, and the Muslims are not as loud. We must ensure that at every point in time, everybody is saying the same thing. And it's only government that can muster, that can ensure that all of these people come together. I know there are several committees, but how active are they? That's important. We need to make sure that those committees are very active to ensure they do this work very well.
With the rising trend of Islamophobia, do you think Muslims will begin to feel threatened?
Obviously, I mean, I honestly feel that that's very, very unfair. I mean, this is not anybody's fault that I'm a Muslim, and I say this often. A lot of people, I'm a Christian, but if you look at it critically, most of us are who we are today because we were born into those religions. Now, yes, when we grow up, we work on what we are and we become better Christians or become better Muslims. But the truth of the matter is, most likely, if I were born into a Muslim family, I probably would still be a Muslim right now. And so I think it's really, really wrong to now start to separate and criticize or judge people based on the fact that they're who they are, most often not because they wanted or chose it, but because that is the way they are. You know, so those are things we need to really be careful about. And I think it's really, really unfair to judge or take decisions based on such reasons. Yeah.
Mr. Adeyemo, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is where we end the program this week. Thanks for watching. Now, as per last week's edition, there were a lot of reactions to the discussions, many of them negative, so negative I can't put them on air. Hopefully, they will be a lot better this week. Tell us what you think about the rising trend of Islamophobia. Write to Diplomatic Channel at channelstv.com or tweet at Diplomatic Chan or at Amarachi_Ubani. I'll see you next time.